More than 100 people are reported dead following an attack on a remote village in central Nigeria. South Africa decides to temporarily step back from G20 engagements as the U.S. continues its presidency. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight, I'm alongside my colleague, Uche, who has our business headlines. Over to you, Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And here is a look at what's coming up on Africa Live This. U.S. President Donald Trump signs into law legislation that reauthorizes the African Growth and Opportunity Act to the end of this year. And Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa defends his country's controversial decision to reclaim land more than a quarter century ago. And that's despite the sanctions that followed. Of course, all of that coming up within the program, but for now, it is back to Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. Once again, a very warm welcome to Africa Live. Let's begin with our top story. Chinese President Xi Jinping has held a phone call with his U.S. counterpart, Donald Trump. President Xi praised their communication over the past year, including a successful meeting in Busan, which he said chartered the direction and course of bilateral relations. Both countries have important milestones on their respective agendas this year. China begins its 15th five-year plan, while the U.S. marks the 250th anniversary of its independence. During the call, President Xi emphasized that the Taiwan question is the most important issue in China-U.S. relations, and that Taiwan is China's territory and the U.S. must handle the issue of arms sales to Taiwan with prudence. President Trump said both the U.S. and China are great countries, and the U.S.-China relationship is by far the most important in the world. He added that the White House would like to work with China to make more progress in their bilateral ties, adding that he understands how China feels about the Taiwan question. Meanwhile, Xi Jinping also had a virtual meeting with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. During the video call, China's president said Beijing would take proactive steps to expand its high standard opening up and share development opportunities with all countries. He added that the international situation had become increasingly turbulent since the beginning of the year. And because of that, President Xi said, as responsible major countries and permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, China and Russia had an obligation to encourage the international community to uphold fairness and justice. He said they should resolutely defend the outcomes of victory in World War II and firmly safeguard the international system centered on the UN and the basic norms of international law. President Vladimir Putin expressed his confidence in the state of bilateral relations between China and Russia. He said both sides should continue to support each other in national sovereignty, economic development, and promoting people-to-people exchanges in education and culture. Putin added that Russia would continue strengthening coordination with China within multilateral frameworks, including the UN, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the BRICS Group. He said Russia would also support the APEC Economic Leaders meeting in the Chinese city of Shenzhen later this year. Well, Xi Jinping, who is also the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China's Central Committee, said China will continue to attach great importance to the development of its relationship with Vietnam. President Xi made the remarks during a meeting in Beijing with a special envoy of General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam's Central Committee, Ta Lam. He also hailed their tradition of sharing their major political agendas, saying the practice embodied their unique and friendly bond. President Xi referenced a recent phone conversation with General Secretary To Lam, where they reached a consensus on advancing the idea of a shared future for China and Vietnam. He said the two nations have made sound progress in all aspects of socialist development and that China remains committed to deepening relations guided by their established principles and objectives. Special Envoy Le Hoai Trung conveyed a message from General Secretary To Lam that Vietnam always prioritizes its relationship with China. He said Vietnam stands ready to work with China to enhance ties based on the leaders' consensus and elevate bilateral relations to benefit both peoples. And now let's catch up with the Uruguayan president who's on a week-long visit to China. On Wednesday, Yamando Orsi spoke with Chinese educators and students at Beijing's Foreign Studies University. CGTN Sunya was there.
Speaking with Chinese educators and students on Wednesday, Uruguayan President Yamando Orsi said his visit to China was driven by a desire to better understand how the China miracle came about and how China has maintained strong and lasting ties with Latin America. He described the current international environment as turbulent, while highlighting the stability of relations between China and Uruguay.
Currently, international relations are experiencing a storm, but China has always respected the rules and championed multilateralism, which Uruguay very much agrees with. We are certainly partners in values. On another level, Uruguay has been working to advance the relationship for 38 years. And as I said, every president from any party has visited China.
During the exchange, educators and students raised questions on bilateral relations, historical influences, and more.
President Orsi said he hopes Uruguay will be seen as a country of peace and stability. He continuously drew evidence from history to inspire everyone. That left a very deep impression on me. I will share my exchange with the president with my students first thing next semester.
I think that it's very important to have good relations between countries. In this case, Uruguay is a small country of Latin America, and I think it's a good example that my country, in my case Mexico, should be doing here.
As a Chinese student sang a well-known song from Uruguay, hearts and minds drew closer, striking new bonds. China and the campus itself have already been witnesses of deepening bilateral ties.
Uruguay's former President Mujica had planted this spruce tree 13 years ago, and earlier today, President Orsi was here adding water and adding soil to it, in the hope that, like this tree, the friendship in between could be evergreen and strong. Sun Ye, CGTN, Beijing.
Iranian media are reporting that a drone belonging to the country's armed forces completed a surveillance mission in international waters shortly after the U.S. military said it had shot down an Iranian aircraft flying towards a U.S. aircraft carrier. The encounter comes ahead of planned talks between the U.S. and Iran. Axios reports the U.S. has agreed to Iran's request to move the talks from Turkey to Oman, with the U.S. claiming to have shot down an Iranian drone and both sides voicing differing demands as to what topics are on the negotiation table. It's unclear just how productive Friday's talks can be. Our correspondent, Ehsan Kiavani, updates us now from Tehran.
A drone Shahed 129 had been conducting its routine and, quote, lawful mission over the high seas. The report says the drone was engaged in identification, surveillance, and imaging activities, and described the mission as a normal and legally permitted operation in open waters. According to the report, the drone successfully transmitted reconnaissance and surveillance images to the command center, but subsequently experienced, quote, a loss of communication. The reason for the communication cut off is under review, according to Iranian officials, and further details will be announced once the matter is clarified. That could refer to the U.S. military's shooting the drone, which has not been officially confirmed by Iran yet. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has stated clearly during the past few days that even if negotiations are finalized with the United States. It will only deal with Iran's nuclear program, emphasizing that Iran's missile capabilities would never be the topic of any negotiations. Therefore, taking into account the United States is demanding much more, we should wait and see whether real negotiations would kick off on Friday or not. Besides, we are not sure if Iran will agree to complete the halt, the enrichment of uranium. Even we're not sure if Iran would hand in the already 60% enriched uranium, which is said to be more than 400 kilograms buried in Iran's bombarded nuclear facilities.
And to central Nigeria, where a Red Cross official says more than 100 people were killed in an attack on a remote village in Kwara State on Tuesday. Gunmen stormed Woro village, setting buildings and shops alight. Several people are missing as villagers fled into surrounding bushland to escape the massacre. It's the deadliest assault recorded this year in the district bordering Niger State, an area increasingly targeted by armed gangs. Meanwhile, the United States has deployed a small team of troops to the country. It marks the first confirmed presence of U.S. forces on the ground since American airstrikes hit suspected Islamic State targets on Christmas Day. The head of the U.S. military's Africa Command, General Dagvin Anderson, said the deployment followed an agreement with Nigeria to strengthen efforts against what he called terrorist threats in West Africa. Nigeria's defense minister confirmed the team's presence. Well, for more on this, here's our correspondent Tessa Makende live for us in Jos. Tessa Makende, welcome to Africa Live. Thank you for joining us. Tessa, the death toll has been rising since, and what's the latest on the attack? What do we know?
Yes, indeed, it really happened in Kwara State. We understand in two communities. The situation has left shock on the spines of many people, especially locals within the state. We've had confirmations from the police. We've also had confirmations from the state government about this situation. Locals from the area are saying that what is locally called bandits, or the gunmen, came in from neighboring Niger State, where there's a huge concentration of forest, where we have a lot of these gunmen hibernating, where they come out and cause these very, very heinous attacks. This is the information we're gathering at the moment. A lot of tension is within that, within the state, which borders Niger State and, of course, Kogi State on the other end. The situation has left many, the state governments around really on their toes, trying to ensure that, they put their heads together to ensure that they forestall any, ugly incidences, to come. So it's really a sad situation, really.
All right, Tessa, following up on what you've just said, do we know what fueled such an attack, and what are you hearing from authorities and locals?
Yeah, we're hearing that, the gunmen were on a campaign to tell the locals to forget about the Nigerian state. These are the pieces of information we're getting, to forget about the Nigerian state, that the Nigerian state hasn't done enough to protect them. So more of a campaign, to recruit young people to join criminal gangs. And so these are the things we're hearing. Investigation is still ongoing, but this is what we're hearing from the locals from that area.
Tessa, also picking up on what you've just said, you touched a little bit earlier on your last statement, but while this is the deadliest assault recorded this year, clashes of this kind are, of course, common there. What is being done to address this situation?
Yeah, I can barely hear you very faintly, but if I can get it correctly, I think you're talking about what the government is doing. Like I said, the government of Kwara State, in conjunction with the forest guards, have deployed personnel, around the communities where this thing happened. Like I also said, the government of Kogi State, neighboring Kogi State, is on its toes. We understand they've had meetings with school proprietors, all ensuring that schools are on high alert to forestall a breakdown, perhaps, to forestall kidnapping and abduction of students. We had these very sad incidences happening last year. And so the state governments within that area are coordinating more, putting their heads together with mobilization and deployment of more security personnel. Before we got to this story, I heard you talking about, the arrival of troops or intelligence from the United States. There's a lot of collaboration between the Nigerian Armed Forces and the United States, of course, other countries like Turkey, all to ensure that these security concerns are tackled once and for all. So at the state level, something is going on. And of course, at the national level, there is some level of synergy and partnerships with other countries to ensure that this insecurity situation is tackled once and for all.
Tessa McKinley, thank you for that clarification. Tessa McKinley speaking to us live from Jos, Nigeria. In other significant news, a son of former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi has been killed by unknown gunmen who broke into his home on Tuesday. Libyan investigators and forensic experts confirmed that Saif al-Islam Gaddafi had died from gunshot wounds. Or was released in 2017. An alumni of the London School of Education, the Emirati Minister of State, Lana Nusebe, said her country supports a ceasefire and a civilian-led government. Sudan's army-led government has been fighting a paramilitary group known as the Rapid Support Forces since April 2023, a conflict which has caused widespread civilian killings, displacement, and economic hardship. The government has accused the UAE of backing the RSF, a claim the UAE denies, though UN experts and some U.S. lawmakers believe the allegations are credible. The U.S., which is hosting the conference, says it expects $1.5 billion in new aid pledges overall and is pushing for a humanitarian truce before Ramadan, but acknowledged progress towards a ceasefire has so far been limited. Other states represented at the event did not make clear promises of new aid. Time now for a short break. We shall reset and return with more Africa Live. Here's what's ahead. Coming up on World Cancer Day, we'll see how African nations are trying to raise more awareness about prevention. Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. South Africa says it will temporarily withdraw from G20 engagements while the U.S. holds the presidency. The decision comes as relations between the two countries continue to strain during the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump. It also comes on the back of confirmation that Washington does not intend to invite Pretoria to the 2026 G20 summit in the U.S. CGTN's Ulysses Njamela has more.
The decision to step back from G20 engagements arises from circumstances beyond the South African government's control. Without an invitation from the U.S. host, South Africa would not be able to take part in leadership meetings, working groups, or summit-level deliberations. This forced Pretoria into its decision, which is described as a temporary setback shaped by diplomatic constraints.
And having hosted the most successful G20 summit in South Africa, it becomes quite unfortunate that South Africa is not invited to participate in the activities of the G20. That continuation of what happened in South Africa could also be missed. And my sense is that there should be a commitment from those who participated in South Africa to ensure that the agreements that have been reached are actually carried through.
Nta warns that the move could weaken Africa's representation in the G20, but added that other G20 members should be able to champion the continent's cause in the meantime.
South Africa has been there in the G20 for quite some time. And I think they have got a good understanding of the dynamics and the activities taking place at the G20 level in terms of the progress that we should get through our participation in the G20. We can only rely on the other G20 member states in terms of how do they ensure that the commitments that were made in South Africa and the level of continuation has to take place in the US.
The pause in the country's G20 participation comes at a time when South Africa is actively strengthening its ties with the African Union, BRICS Plus, and South-South partnerships. Some caution that this does not mean that South Africa is ready to abandon relations with the West.
It should not be seen as though South Africa is moving away from Western partners. Tensions are high between Washington and Pretoria. So this should be seen as a strategic shift temporarily to say, let's pause and shy away from attending the G20. And it's temporary. I don't think it should be seen as something that is permanent.
However, some critics say that with this move, South Africa may face risks in financing and trade, especially with US-linked institutions. But Sean Masemula believes that investors will likely be more patient with the situation.
Investors will be looking at different variables, especially in terms of the markets. But I don't think we should expect dramatic shifts, because I think what investors are waiting for now, not just investors, but a lot of financial institutions are waiting for economic policy consistency. So they'll be looking at from here on what happens.
The G20 group of nations includes the world's top economies, as well as the European Union and the African Union regional blocs. It accounts for 85% of the world's GDP and 2/3 of its population. South Africa plans to return to the G20 once the leadership moves to the United Kingdom in 2027. Ulysses Nta for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the leader of the AFC M23 rebel movement has claimed responsibility for a drone attack which targeted an airport in the country's northeast, calling it a warning to the government. Shopo province authorities said 8 explosive-laden drones were launched at Kisangani Airport on Sunday, but were all shot down. Kisangani lies hundreds of kilometers from current front lines in North and South Kivu provinces, where M23 rebels have seized large areas since 2022. In a statement posted online, rebel leader Richard Nta warned that any aircraft used against rebel-held areas would be targets. It comes as the DRC and the M23 agreed in Doha to the deployment of the first UN ceasefire monitoring team. It will head to the eastern city of Uvira in the coming days. Meanwhile, the crisis in the eastern DRC has led to an influx of refugees in neighboring Burundi. The country has received over 100,000 Congolese refugees since fighting intensified near the border in early December. UN officials say the huge numbers are overwhelming Burundi's humanitarian response. CGTN's David Nta with the details.
At the Busuma camp in eastern Burundi, the sheer volume of tents housing Congolese refugees has ballooned to a staggering size. Thousands who fled their homes in fighting in eastern DRC now face other problems such as overcrowding and lack of food. Some say they are still on a waiting list for tents more than 2 months after their arrival, whilst the struggle to get food is a daily one.
I arrived here on 13th November 2025. I'm from the 5th convoy, but so far I have not had anywhere to spend the night, even though I have 14 children. No shelter, no rations. We are just here like this. When we arrived, the WFP tried to give us a bag of flour and beans, but that was nothing for me with all these children. We can't take the situation any longer. We really need to find solutions for us.
The camp, which is only served by one mobile clinic, is also struggling to meet the medical needs of the refugees. One person says it's common for some patients to be turned away when the staff are overwhelmed, and the facility is also grappling with medicine shortages. Disease is everywhere and often deadly.
Another problem is that when we fall ill, some people can be treated and others cannot. The same goes for medicines. Some people can get them and others cannot. There is not enough. When we arrived here, people were suffering greatly from cholera, but today it is malaria that is killing most people because of the intense cold. Our recommendation is that houses be built for us, blankets be distributed to everyone, and rations be provided.
To improve conditions at the camp, the UN Refugee Agency says it requires more funding. It even launched a fundraising campaign in December in collaboration with the Burundian government. But it's clear that a lot more effort will be needed to improve conditions.
We must act quickly. We must respond to prevent the situation from continuing to deteriorate. Above all these people need to eat. You and I eat, don't we? People need to eat even if it's only one meal a day. And these are needs that cannot wait. We need to build shelters to protect them from the rain and bad weather. That cannot wait either.
The UN says the humanitarian crisis comes at a delicate time for Burundi, with neighboring Tanzania ramping up efforts to repatriate some 110,000 Burundian refugees who sought asylum there in 2015 after fleeing a tense political climate in their home country. Officials there have warned that the last 2 camps hosting Burundian refugees will soon be closed after years of hosting them. It may be a case that conditions at the camps in Burundi get much worse before they get better. David Nta, CGTN.
Today marks World Cancer Day, a day meant to raise awareness about the disease and to unite and support those affected by it. In Nigeria, prostate cancer remains the most prevalent and deadly type of cancer among men in the country. The World Health Organization estimates that Nigeria accounted for roughly 1/5 of all African prostate fatalities in 2022 alone. Experts say one of the biggest challenges to tackling prostate cancer in Nigeria is a culture of silence, which causes many men to present it very late to healthcare services. CGTN's Deji Badamosi has more.
Nigeria's prostate cancer statistics are quite sobering. In 2022 alone, the country recorded not less than 18,000 new cases, resulting in more than 10,000 deaths. That's according to data from WHO International Agency for Research on Cancer. Prostate cancer is the primary cause of cancer-related deaths among males in Nigeria. Experts say the seemingly high fatality rate is mainly because most patients present very late.
And when they present very late, usually a good number of them will die within a year or two. So if you imagine somebody who presents very late at the age of 68, before 70 is gone. Whereas if you are presented very early, maybe 4 or 5 years before that time, you can live up to 80.
Cancer health advocates say part of the reasons for late presentation of cases is a culture of silence and local needs often associated with cancer generally in the country.
Sometimes men believe that the prostate exam itself is a problem and can cause problems to them or damage their manhood. So that is another barrier to seeking screening and care. The idea that only old men get cancer, it is more often diagnosed in older men, but younger men, even in their 40s, can develop prostate cancer, unfortunately. So those, I think, are some of the most common myths that I've come across.
But awareness of the disease is growing. So is the willingness to screen, thanks in part to cancer awareness campaigners like the Thomas John Prostate Foundation and others who continue to promote awareness about the disease.
We still see a good number of people present very late, but we now see a gradual change of people now more concerned about their life. So I get more and more people are getting better aware, and we now see a paradigm shift of majority of late cases to the younger age group who really want to find out where I am. Am I prone? And then now we are getting to a stage in which I'm sure in a couple of years, maybe another 10 years, complications, death rates will naturally nosedive.
Campaigners are pushing for more openness about the disease and trying to break long-held misconceptions about it. Even religious institutions are pushing for openness and early screening as well.
Within a family, if a male member of that family has prostate cancer, the younger people in the family, sons, brothers, higher risk. So they would want to start screening sometimes earlier, but they wouldn't do that if your diagnosis was kept secret and nobody knew you ever had it. Wives, play a huge role as well in encouraging their husbands, brothers, sons to be screened, to play a supportive role through the treatment process.
Sometimes we even bring health practitioners to church and holds conferences, seminars, and so on, where they teach our people various aspects of health. Now, with regards to men, prostate health is one of the common issues now that men face. And of course, in our men fellowship programs now, we bring in professionals to talk about prostate health.
Knowledge of prostate cancer is certainly on the rise in Nigeria, but experts say more still needs to be done to bring down the mortality rate, which the WHO puts at 16.3 per 100,000, and that early screening and presentation will make a whole world of difference. Deji Badimosi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
In Ghana, breast cancer is the most commonly diagnosed cancer among women. But beyond hospitals and treatment centers, survivor networks and peer support groups are emerging as powerful tools for combating stigmas and encouraging early screening. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
Phyllis Adole Bachman is a breast cancer survivor. But when she first noticed the early signs of the disease in her breast about 12 years ago, she was in denial.
I was doing self-breast examination and I felt a lump in my breast. That was in 2014. So I discussed it with a doctor friend of mine. He came to examine it. And then he said I should go to a hospital in Kanishie for them to do biopsy to see what it was.
It would take nearly 5 years before Bachman was finally medically diagnosed with breast cancer and then began her treatment.
This is how chemo did to me. I lost my whole hair. And then the second picture, when I was done with the chemo, the hair started growing. And then the third one is when I did my surgery.
Late detection continues to be one of the biggest challenges, significantly reducing survival rates. Ghana records close to 5,000 new cases of breast cancer every year. Doctors say many women are still being diagnosed too late, largely because access to screening remains limited, especially in rural communities. Bachman is part of a group of breast cancer survivors known as the Breast Society of Ghana, raising awareness about the disease to help break the stigma surrounding it.
If we hide our story, it's going to hide a lot of people. But we coming out to share our story, it's going to help a lot of people.
Doctors believe the role of breast cancer survivors and support groups goes a long way to encourage early screening.
When it comes to going through the treatments, the chemotherapy, the radiotherapy, surgery, having your breast taken off, they sound like very difficult concepts or things that you probably can't survive. But when you see somebody who's gone through it, the person shows you pictures. This was me going through chemotherapy. This was me. Or as it is now, I have a scar. I don't have a breast there. I put in a prosthesis, and when I'm walking around, I'm okay. So when they have the close interaction with the survivors like that, they get to see that really this person has been through this and it's okay.
Bachman wants to continue raising awareness about breast cancer and hopes to save lives one woman at a time. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Uche's in the studio, and that means it's time for our business segment. Over to Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. U.S. President Donald Trump signs into law legislation that reauthorizes the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, to the end of this year. And Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa defends his country's controversial decision to reclaim land more than a quarter century ago, despite the sanctions that followed. Let's start off with U.S. President Donald Trump. He has signed into law legislation that reauthorizes the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA. Now, the Trade Preference Program will run through to December 31st, 2026, with a retroactive effect from September 30th of last year. Now, of course, AGOA provides eligible sub-Saharan African nations with duty-free access to the U.S. market for over 1,800 products. The extension was included in a federal funding package, which the U.S. House passed on Tuesday to end a partial government shutdown. Trump signed that legislation later on Tuesday, and in a statement, Ambassador Jameson Greer of the United States Trade Representative Office indicated that the deal must demand more from trading partners and also yield more market access for U.S. businesses. That includes farmers and ranchers. Now, Greer also added that his office will work with relevant agencies to give effect to any modifications made to the legislation. However, some critics still worry that the legislation will have little immediate impact because of the global tariffs that Trump has imposed. Well, heading back to the continent, Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa, has defended his country's decision to reclaim land from white farmers, and that is despite the enduring effect of sanctions on the country's economy. Now, of course, Western nations imposed targeted sanctions on the South African nation. That's following the violent state-backed seizure of white-owned commercial farms starting in the year 2000. Emmerson Mnangagwa was speaking at the World Government Summit in Dubai on a panel that also included Botswana's Duma Boko and Sierra Leone's Julius Maada. The summit continues this week with panels, discussions and closed-door sessions, which will be addressing global governance and economic strategy.
Our economy has faced challenges. I'm sure you're aware.
Yes.
Zimbabwe has been under sanctions for decades as a result of us claiming our land from the British and making ourselves independent. We seized the land and gave it to our people. So sanctions were imposed on us. But in spite of all that constraint we have developed, and we are happy that we have developed on our own, and we feel very independent. Land did not belong to a race. It belonged to Zimbabweans. Right. So when the colonialists took land from us, time came when we asserted ourselves, take back our land. And those who wanted to have land at the same basis as the African people of Zimbabwe remained. But those who felt were superior left.
Well, let's shift our focus now. Sierra Leone's Julius Maada Bio pointed to recent international developments, including in Venezuela, as evidence of the erosion in the rules-based order.
And I'm still stunned. It was so rare that I still have to understand whether the world order, the rules-based society, is still existing, and if not, what becomes of the world? That's why I earlier described the state as we are in a state of flux, because everything that we have understood as the basis for international order is fragmenting or being destroyed right in our face.
And moving on now, South Africa has officially become a member of the African Export-Import Bank. Now, according to a statement from Afrexim Bank, it says it has already lined up an initial $8 billion financing package to deepen the South African economy. Now, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa said the accession was evidence of the country's commitment to African industrial development and to deepening trade, investment and development across the continent. Of course, South Africa was unable to join fully when the bank was set up back in 1993 because the country was still under apartheid rule. Afrexim Bank membership will give Africa's most advanced economy access to new financial products at a time when its tariff row with the US has, of course, increased the need for new export markets. Now, in Tanzania, a ride-hailing giant Uber has officially closed its operations after nearly a decade of service there. The company notified riders through an in-app message, expressing regret for the disruption and also thanking users for their support over the years. Uber's withdrawal follows years of friction with the Land Transport Regulatory Authority, whose strict pricing rules, commission caps, and also regulatory controls repeatedly challenged the company's business model. Growing competition from local and regional players such as Bolt and Little InDrive and also Farasi further eroded Uber's market position in the country. Now, of course, Uber's departure affects thousands of drivers who relied on the platform for income, and it also reduces transport options for commuters in major cities.
We are currently using the Farasi and Bolt applications. Yes, we get some benefits on these two applications, but we got better benefits on Uber because they gave us drivers better welfare and really valued their drivers. Bolt and Farasi care more about their customers instead.
We are hoping that they reduce the commission costs because it's tough economically now. The cost of fuel is too high. We have families and kids. We work so hard, but at the end of the day, when you do your calculations, you end up with nothing or little to spare.
Considering its operations cost, it was not too popular, and I think the decision to cease operations here in Dar es Salaam and Tanzania will not have a major effect because we still have applications that are more popular than Uber.
Well, let's stay in Tanzania in the commercial hub Dar es Salaam. It is hosting what is called the African Conference on Sustainable Agricultural Mechanization. Organizers say the inaugural event is aimed at discussing ways to modernize farming across the continent. Now, despite employing more than 60% of Africa's labor force, agriculture is still largely dependent on manual labor. And as CGTN's Isaac Lukando now reports, authorities in Tanzania are looking to change that.
Across much of Africa, farming still depends on simple tools, with hand hoes remaining common for land preparation. But a landmark gathering on agricultural mechanization, the first of its kind on the continent, is underway in Dar es Salaam, seeking to shift that reality. The four-day meeting convened by the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, together with the government of Tanzania, brings policymakers, development partners, private sector players, researchers, young people and farmers across Africa under one roof. Officials say the need to transform agriculture has never been more urgent.
The impacts of climate change, including droughts, floods and changes in rainfall patterns, continue to reduce agricultural production and increase the risk of food insecurity.
According to the United Nations estimates, Africa has fewer than 2 tractors for every 1,000 hectares of farmland. By comparison, the global average exceeds 10, a disparity that continues to undermine productivity and resilience to climate shocks.
Mechanization today, though, cannot look like the mechanization of the past. Shipping in large machines without financing, training, repair services, or local adaptation has not delivered lasting results. Africa does not need more equipment sitting idle. It needs systems that work. And mechanization done differently as a complete ecosystem, not just a shipment of machines, is no longer optional. It is essential.
During the conference, Tanzania unveiled the second phase of its 10-year agricultural mechanization strategy. The plan includes rolling out 10,000 tractors and power tillers, with the aim that by 2030, at least 80% of farmers cultivating less than 2 acres can access mechanization services. The stated ambition of the Tanzanian government is to feed Africa and the world. To reach that goal, it has increased its agricultural budget by more than 300% over the past 5 years. Authorities believe that building a modern farming sector will generate benefits beyond the 65% of Tanzanians who rely on agriculture, extending economic gains across borders. Officials note that investment in agricultural tools across Africa has yet to meet the needs of smallholder farmers, and that much more must be done.
Governments are expected to put in place enabling environments, including policies, laws and investment incentives, so that the private sector can fully participate, improve access to agricultural tools and reduce costs for farmers.
Organizers say discussions over the next few days will be centered on knowledge sharing, practical solutions, and building resilient agricultural systems that serve small and medium-scale farmers. They hope the outcomes will reshape farming across Africa, strengthening food security, increasing resilience, and driving economic growth on the continent. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, that is all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, American aircraft manufacturer Boeing forecasts that African airlines will add over 1,200 new planes to their fleets in the next 2 decades. We'll bring you more on that at the top of the hour. For now, it is back to Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche, and we're not done just yet. We've got your sports segment coming up. Let's take a look at those headlines. Coming up in sports, Kenya prepares to face Tanzania in a qualifier for the Women's Under-20 FIFA World Cup.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Welcome into Sport on Africa Live with me, Richard Nta. Let's talk a bit of football, and let's start with women's football. And the head coach of the Kenya's under-20 team has named her squad for an upcoming World Cup qualifying tie against Tanzania. Jacqueline Juma has largely remained faithful to the players that eliminated Ethiopia in the last round. And in what is the third round of qualifying, the Rising Starlets will host Tanzania on Friday before traveling south for the return leg next weekend. The winners will progress to the fourth and final round and possible qualification for the World Cup, which will be held in Poland in September.
We have managed to name the final squad. We were especially looking at how our competition is. We need players who are mentally tough because this is a really big stage, given that Tanzania has players who have played in their national team. So we wanted players that can match them, players who are ready. Those were some of the factors we were looking for, players who will be ready at the shortest time possible.
Now, we're just 2 days away from the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics, and the famous flame is getting ever closer to the venue in Milan. Former Arsenal and Barcelona playmaker Cesc Fabregas carried it through the city of Como, home of the Serie A side that he currently coaches. Earlier, dozens of other torchbearers took turns in taking it past other sites along the route. In Como, the Olympic cauldron was lit in Piazza Cavour. Now, one of the biggest challenges for Olympic organizers is trying to facilitate the movement of hundreds of thousands of spectators and athletes across the various venues of northern Italy. Events will take place at 7 sites, making this the most spread out edition ever. CGTN's Hermione Kitson has the story.
The 2026 Winter Olympics will be defined by two very different backdrops. On one side, the urban setting of Milan. On the other, the mountainous terrain of northern Italy. Olympic venues will be spread across 3 regions. The main areas, Milan, Cortina, Bormio and Livigno. With events hundreds of kilometres apart, the big question is transport. Regional rail operator Train Nord says the network is ready for the influx of travellers.
We want to be protagonists of sustainable mobility during a big event like this. So we're adding an extra 120 trips a day to serve Olympic visitors.
Milan Central Station will be the key point of departure.
In 2 hours and 15 minutes, you can reach Tirano from Milan Central. From there are bus connections to reach Bormio and Livigno, 2 of the most important Olympic areas.
While filming this story, our team travelled by train from Milan to Venice and then drove to Cortina. The journey took around 5.5 hours, but travel times vary significantly depending on traffic. To minimise travel for athletes, there are 6 Olympic villages spread across the competition zones.
During the Games, we have various parallel systems for residents and spectators. For spectators, we have park and ride locations around 60 and 15 kilometers from Cortina, and from there they will be transported by shuttle bus.
New roads and updated rail lines are expected to be among the lasting legacies of the Games. From the ground to the skies, cable cars will also play a crucial role in transporting spectators and athletes between mountain competition venues, offering not just the fastest, but also the most scenic routes. Not all projects are on schedule. A new cable car connecting Cortina to the Tofane Alpine skiing venue has faced major delays. With the final countdown underway, questions remain over how smoothly these dispersed Winter Olympics will run, but organisers insist they're on track and almost ready to deliver. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Cortina.
And now to the NBA, where LeBron James and Luka Doncic were high scorers as the Los Angeles Lakers powered past the Brooklyn Nets on Tuesday night. Austin Reeves, in his first game since Christmas, scored 15 points in 21 minutes. The 27-year-old entered late in the first quarter with the Lakers already well in control. Jake LaRavia added 18 for the Lakers against a Brooklyn team coming off an extraordinary 53-point loss in Detroit on Sunday. The Nets have lost 9 of their last 10 and are well off playoff contention. The Lakers remain fifth in the West and face the Philadelphia 76ers next.
Yeah, I thought he moved great and looked like Austin. He had 3 or 4 really good looks in the first half that didn't go down, but did a nice job of attacking the basket, getting to the free throw line. It says he had 1 assist. Does it say 1 assist? Yeah. I didn't realize throwing the ball off the backboard to a teammate is not considered assist anymore, but I think that is emblematic of he's just wants to play, and he wants to be a good teammate, and certainly give LeBron a highlight and give the fans a highlight. But he played great.
Meanwhile, LeBron James will be joining up with Olympic teammates Steph Curry and Kevin Durant once again, this time at the All-Star Game. On Tuesday night, the NBA announced the rosters for this season's mid-season showcase event, splitting 25 names into 3 squads. This will be the debut of a new All-Star format, this one, the U.S. versus the world, on February the 15th at the home of the Los Angeles Clippers. The NBA and the National Basketball Players Association unveiled the long-awaited new plan in their latest attempt to spark renewed interest in the event following a largely criticized format last season. The Clippers' Kawhi Leonard was added to the pool of U.S. players shortly before the rosters were unveiled. New York's Karl Anthony Towns, who was born in New Jersey but has played international basketball for the Dominican Republic, is also included in the world team. Well, that is it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send us your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. For the team, I'm Richard Nta saying thank you so much for watching. Up next is Global Biz with Uche. So stay tuned and stay here on CGTN.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and its financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, global shares rose this Wednesday, recovering from earlier lows as a sell-off in software stocks lost some intensity today. But across emerging markets, stocks were more subdued, and analysts say that investors took a breather following the previous session's rally, while we also saw commodity prices sort of boosting assets in some markets. MSCI's gauge of global emerging market equities was down 0.1% on the day, and that is after marking its biggest one-day jump since April on Tuesday. Emerging market assets, of course, have been shaken by a sharp plunge in precious metals and also a slight recovery in the dollar this week. Now, also coming up on our show today, dozens of ministers are in the U.S. for a critical minerals conference in Washington, D.C. Zimbabwe's annual inflation retreats to single-digit territory for the first time in nearly 3 decades. And in Ethiopia, flights to and from the northern Tigray region resume following clashes between regional and national forces. Welcome. Now, the United States is hosting ministers from dozens of countries for a critical minerals conference in Washington, D.C. Of course, critical minerals are raw materials designated by governments as critical for their economies. High on the agenda is the question of setting a minimum price for critical minerals, something many countries are pushing for. However, the U.S. is reported to be backing away from this suggestion so far. Well, on Monday, President Donald Trump announced the launch of a U.S. strategic minerals stockpile, which he dubbed Project Vault. It will be funded by $2 billion of private capital, along with a $10 billion loan from the U.S. Export